You were talking about Islamic extremism and specifically Saudi Arabia's part in funding, promoting, exporting this brand of the most extreme brand of Muslim extremism. Could you talk about that and how significant Saudi Arabia's role has been over the past quarter century?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it served several purposes, but in short, Saudi Arabia and the founders of that country have subscribed to a version of Islam known as Wahhabism. That's named after a person from Saudi Arabia and his interpretation of it. But it was the cornerstone of that country's religious interpretation of Islam that it began to export through a lot of different programs. I mean, even in the 1980s, when the United States and Saudi Arabia were fighting the Russians in Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia was very fundamental in recruiting people to go and fight in Afghanistan. Part of that was based on using this interpretation of Islam as a way to recruit individuals from around the world to come and be a part of something bigger. When that war was over, Saudi Arabia continued to export that ideology through all kinds of programs, whether it was educational programs, it's health clinics that established across the developing world. And so more and more, and certainly now with the internet, the globalization of that interpretation has become a major point of concern. There isn't enough forces there aren't enough forces to counter that interpretation in some parts of the Arab and Muslim world, and that's why it is still a predominant form of that militant interpretation of Islam. A very important word here, a militant interpretation of Islam.
Exactly.
As is his royal obligation, once a week Crown Prince Abdullah receives supplicants seeking direct aid. 100 years ago, his family unified the nation with the backing of strict Wahhabi clerics. And they cut a deal. The royals would run politics and the economy. The clerics could dictate social policy. It's a deal many believe fostered is extremism.
If you look at the rhetoric of ISIS and the rhetoric of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, the ideologue of the Wahhabi school in Saudi Arabia, there is absolutely no difference between the rhetoric of ISIS and the rhetoric of the Wahhabis. And I, by the way, I'm calling them Wahhabis. They don't like to be called Wahhabis. They like to be called Salafis, yes? And it's high time the non-Muslim world knew the biggest problem is the country with the best oil. Make a decision. You can't turn around and have it both ways. Either diplomatic relations are cut, or do not be surprised if there isn't another terrorist bomb in this part of the world. America, Europe, Africa, young Sunni kids are being brought up on Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim. And that's why the Sunni world is in absolute chaos. The Saudi royal family does one thing, which means they are unstoppable. They fund university departments in the world, giving them big money. 20 million Harvard, 20 million Georgetown, 20 million Oxford, 20 million Cambridge, 20 million Princeton, 20 million Yale. These are the think tanks of the earth. When you fund them, that means academics write books. You know, there's one writer who wrote a whole book praising Muawiyah as the savior of the Khalif of Islam. And that's why, what do you find? Many of Ahl Sunnah say, we don't agree with Abu Bakr, Baghdadi and ISIS. You say to them, why? They say, because that's not real Khilafah. So hold on. Your problem is Abu Bakr, Baghdadi's oppressive ways, or your problem is that his Khilafah is not the real Khilafah? Therefore, those who are saying they're anti-ISIS, don't fall for this whole idea that it's because ISIS is bad. No. It's just ISIS's conception of Khilafah is something they don't agree with. If they were given a chance to have a Khilafah, they would come back. And what's the problem? You have to come back with the legal edicts, and then you're in trouble.
But defended sending extremist fighters to Syria.
Tell us why you want to send fighters to Syria.
When the Syrian people call upon all Muslims to support them, we in the Salafi jihadi movement answered this call, and this is for the sake of God that we went to fight in Syria.
A fight, he said, that men and women are willing to face prison for or death.